All right, we are back talking Cleveland Browns football on Inside Our Lads NFL Depth Charts on the Our Lads Football Network. And that means Fred Greetham, the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report at 247 Sports, joins us once again. Fred, thanks for taking your time out to talk Cleveland Browns football with us again.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
All right, so this is the last time we're going to talk before the draft, unless anything real nutty happens. But for the most part, it's been a pretty quiet offseason for the Browns. They've only had a handful of key outside free agents that will wear the new unis for 2021. And the most important, of course, being the secondary with Johnson and Hill joining the backfield. But again, not a very busy offseason for Cleveland.
Well, they were precision, well thought moves all on the defense. They signed at least one veteran at every defensive position. Tack McKinley at the edge, Malik Jackson on the interior defensive line, John Johnson at safety, Troy Hill at corner, and Anthony Walker at linebacker. I think that Andrew Berry really had edge rusher in his sights. I know right out of the gate there was at least two bigger name free agents that they went after. I think they just held, when it got a little out of hand on the financial side of it. But all things being considered, they said John Johnson was their number one target in free agency. I think that move alone really, will improve the defense. Joe Woods wants to play three safeties, so now he has three safeties that can play in his system.
Yep. And then, of course, also looking for that slot corner, which was important. Kevin Johnson was gone, and Johnson didn't have a big season anyway last year, so they add in the local kid, Hill, comes over, a Youngstown's native, and like you said, it may not be a lot of parts coming in, but the Browns sure targeted specific players and specific positions that they needed to address. To address, not only did they add that big time veteran safety, but Hill will be a big part, in that nickel position as well.
Yeah, I don't think they're done. I think that they still want to add an edge and another corner. I think ultimately, they're hoping Greedy Williams is able to come back, healthy. Missed all of 2020 with a nerve issue in his shoulder. And I think they want to pair him with Denzel Ward. Because of the injury, Terence Mitchell ended up starting all 16 regular season games and 2 playoff games. But he was really counted on to be the maybe fourth corner.
Yeah.
He played every game.
Yeah.
So Hill could move outside if Williams has some trouble. But I think all things being equal, they're planning on him playing the slot. And they're planning on Williams coming back. But I think they will add another corner, whether they can get another veteran or they will draft one high in the draft.
Yeah, matter of fact, I did a mock draft 7-rounder with our lads and Dan Shanka and the guys, and one of my teams for the 20. This is not the 2021 guide. The 2021 guide will be out in a few days. This is last year's guide, but I have 11 teams that I'm responsible for. One of them, the Cleveland Browns, and that's exactly what I did. Matter of fact, defensive backfield, even after those 2 signings, was still, in my opinion, one of the top needs for the Browns going into the draft because of what you just said. With Delpit's injury, with Greedy Williams' health concerns, there's still, and Mitchell gone, Johnson gone, Sendejo, Joseph free agents. There was a need to still add a couple of more DBs to the mix, and that's probably what we're going to see in the draft.
Yeah, and that's where I think that last year Andrew Berry picked up Malcolm Smith actually after training camp began. He ended up being the second leading tackler on the team, and they re-signed him to another 1-year deal. I see him doing these surgical signings, and addressing those needs. And there's going to be some guys available, I think, at linebacker or edge or cornerback or even safety. A couple of the guys that were free agents with the Browns have not signed. Carl Joseph's probably the most prevalent if they feel they need another safety to go with what they've done. But that's what I think they'll do, is see what happens after the draft and then fill in the pieces from there. But you're right. Last year they were playing in the playoffs with Robert Jackson, who was probably their sixth or seventh corner, who had never played defensive. He was a special teams guy, and
Yeah.
so they know that, in this day and age, you got to have depth, at corner and safety and so forth. So, yeah, I think that everything has been very thoughtful and they've addressed all the needs. They do have Andrew Billings returning after opting out. He's in effect replacing Larry Ogunjobi,
Yep.
and they have Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams. So with the five guys they signed, I think they really have like eight new potential starters on defense to go with Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. So this defense was abysmal last year. They gave up over 26 points a game. And I think that they realize if they don't have to be the 85 Chicago Bears. If they can just get that defense even in the middle of the pack where they're giving up 20, 21 points a game, this offense will outscore most teams because all 11 on the offense are returning as we stand right now.
Yeah, matter of fact, I'm pretty sure my top need going into the draft was pass rush. I felt that the Browns had to do whatever I mean, you run the type of defense the Browns are running, got to have more than one pass rusher. And with Olivier Vernon's Achilles injury, nobody knows what's going to happen to him whenever he's healthy. So he may not even be a guy that the team decides to bring back. That's a big opening. That means the team needs to now look. What are they, 25th overall in the first round? That may not be a bad position to grab a pass rusher because there may not be an edge rusher taken in this first round until maybe somewhere between the top 10 and top 15. That might be the first guy, if that. So some of these edge rushers are going to drop a little bit, which will be a good thing for Cleveland, for the Browns, if they want to take one of the top 2 or 3 edge rushers.
I think that, that was my top, before free agency. I did five story on the Orange and Brown report, 5 steps to get the Browns to the next level, meaning the Super Bowl. And number one was edge rusher. And Takk McKinley, to me, has a lot of upsides. He's been disappointing. I know the Browns are really high on him. They claimed him 3 times last year when he was waived. And they also tried to trade for him. So Andrew Berry really likes him. But I do not want to put all my eggs in that basket. And so that's why I think they were at the top of the list looking for an edge. Hendricks had got $20 million from the Bengals guaranteed. I think they just backed down from that. When you see all the money paid to edge rushers, I agree totally with you. That is why I think they will go after an edge rusher, is because you lock up that guy for 5 years, instead of paying a free agent $20 million a year,
Yep.
And so that's kind of, what I see. But I don't want them to depend on a rookie to step in. It seems like those guys don't come out of the chutes, sacking double digits.
Sure.
Maybe they will, but I see them getting an edge rusher with one of those first 2 to 3 picks.
And it's also important. Do you think that, because I do think that that's the case. And look, Anthony Walker was a key signing. Just like you said, they zeroed in on they needed a cover guy. So they brought in Walker. But it's still, I still see a need for a little bit more speed. Somebody that, I don't know if it's a specific player or a team effort when you've got a guy like Lamar Jackson in your division and you have to play big games against the Ravens for the next several seasons. You need a couple of guys in the back 7 with speed, guys that can roam around, cover, and especially try to take care of Lamar Jackson whenever the Browns play them.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, I'm working on a story. We ran out of time talking with Andrew Berry, but I wanted to get his thoughts. Could you devote a roster spot to getting that guy, that hybrid safety linebacker that has the speed? If that's all he did was shut down Lamar Jackson, that would be worth it, because you play them twice, and that is the roadblock I see to winning the division. And And when they've lost to the Ravens both times last year, it always seemed it wasn't so much that he was such a great thrower, but every time they had him cornered, he dumped it over, to a tight end.
Sure.
And if they went back on the receivers, he ran for 15, 20 yards. And so they like Jacob Phillips, very fast linebacker from LSU they got last year in the third round, was injured a bit. He could be that guy,
Hmm.
or one of these hybrid safeties I'm talking about, like Grant Delpit or Ronnie Harrison, or even John Johnson could be what they have in mind. But if they look at that specifically in the draft, that's where your guy like Zaven Collins, could be that type of guy. Those guys that can kind of do it all. They can run, cover, and you might specifically find a guy in the scheme that's his primary job is
Yep.
to mirror Lamar Jackson.
Absolutely. All right. Offense. This was not the big, like you said, this was an offense that did, an incredible job last season. It's not the issue this offseason. It's just about keeping the team together, getting healthier with OBJ. But I do look here and I see that a couple of needs depth wise, a couple of important needs, because we saw what happened when OBJ went down and how important it was to have the next guy. And I think it's important, don't you think, for the Browns to add another wide receiver, somebody that can be that next guy, and then also a really good number 3 running back, because we saw how important the running game is for the Browns. And I noticed that when they had the injury last season to Chubb, they had a big drop off in points during those games. You have to have that extra guy because the running game is so important for Baker Mayfield in this offense that if anything happens to either one of those guys, you got to have that next guy that almost seamlessly can take over for a few games, not the long haul, because these guys are special, but still a definite upgrade from what the team had last year.
Yeah, I mean, right now they have the top 6 receivers from last year's initial depth chart returning. A big, he wasn't from outside, but they kept Rashard Higgins. Um, and he's the guy ultimately that stepped in when Beckham went down. He's not the deep threat that Beckham is. And they really are high on Kadero Hodge. A lot of people, thought Higgins was really the second or third receiver. But when Beckham and Landry were healthy, it was Kadero Hodge who was the number 3 receiver because he's more of a downfield blocker.
Okay.
And in Kevin Stefanski's offense, that's what is required. And so Higgins moved into the 2 receiver when Beckham went down. But I agree they do need a deep threat. I think some of the mocks that are talking about wide receivers would be they're almost on offense where they could take the best player available, and they could also be thinking down the road. A lot of people assume they would be moving on from Beckham or Landry this year because they combined are the number 1 and 2 salary cap space. They take 30 to 31 million this year of the salary cap, and so that's quite a bit. That's almost 20% of your salary cap. And I think they will go with what they have this year. But looking at the next year, is that you have Beckham still under contract for 15 million. Landry, I think, is coming off. Um, and so you look at that amount of money, they feel good about Donovan Peoples Jones. And that's where I think they were willing to let Higgins walk and Peoples Jones would move up into the 3 spot. But with that said, they brought the band back together. And I think a lot will depend on how this season goes. But I could see them taking, a receiver that can take the top off, for maybe not this year, but even for the future. You know, I can't see them take him in the first round
No.
because of the needs on defense.
Yeah.
But in the second, third round, I think, yes, they would. They also like JoJo Natson. He was lost for the season last year with a ACL. The special team coordinator, Mike Prefer, when the Browns played the Rams 2 years ago, he went on and on about how awesome he was. He got signed as a free agent, And I watched all training camp. They were running him with the first team offense, kind of like the Tyreek Hill with the little shovel passes
Okay.
and end around things. So I think they think a little highly. They re signed him coming off the ACL to be the returner, but I don't know if they'll do much for this year at receiver. But they could have an eye on the future, and a
Yeah.
lot would be dominoes with the guys at the top.
Yeah, that's why I was even thinking that when you have what 9 draft picks, and I'm not talking about the 4 in the top 91, whatever it is. I'm definitely talking about more of once you get, especially the other thing too is I think for those last 5 picks, you think about all right, maybe we if the right running back comes along because it's such an important part of our offense as a number 3, if we need that extra wide receiver. Since we and like you said, because we definitely can use a deep threat, but also you look at it at a situation where this is a team that has to build up special teams, and I would assume that several of those picks, those last 5 picks, maybe at least 3 of them will be designed to improve special teams.
Yeah, I don't see him using 9 draft picks. This team is deeper than it's been since I've covered them in the last 20 years, and I don't know if there's roster spots for 9 rookies. And so with that said, I can see Andrew Barry using, some of those picks, packaging them up to move up if
Okay.
there's a specific player in one of those top 3 rounds. And if they get down to, you know, second, third day and aren't really enamored with anybody, I can see them trading down for more picks next year. Um, because last year they ended up, I think, selecting 6 guys, and I don't see them picking more than 6 this year. I could be wrong,
Okay.
but this is a team, like you said, most of those guys would be fighting for special teams. Some of the guys they've let go were more special teams oriented, like linebackers like Tay Davis and Tavier Thomas, a corner, and some of that. So I see some of those late signings and free agency before camp being guys more for the special teams. But I really think he will trade up if he can with some of those uh, final 4 or 5 picks.
All right. And what about speaking of special teams? Any chance that they use, if they have one of those later picks, on a kicker? I know Parky's here, but I mean he's just a kicker. He's nobody special. I would think that he'll start, but and then punter is also, wouldn't that be a position that possibly is open as well?
Yeah, Jamie Gillen, they kept him when he was a rookie, the Scottish Hammer. Beat out Britton Colquitt, who was a Pro Bowl punter, saved him a lot of money, and he had a great rookie year. But then last year really seemed to fall off. I know he did have COVID and missed a little bit of time. I don't know all the reasons, but I think they will bring somebody in to challenge him. As far as kicker, they did re-sign Parkey, who was a free agent. One thing a lot of people don't know, unless you're following the team, is that they kept Matthew McCrane all season last year on the practice squad. And I thought that was kind of a curious move. A little bit, I think, to keep Parkey's feet to the fire, so
Oh,
to say.
okay.
But they must like him, is that for that reason. So he
Okay.
might be somebody that they bring back. But that said, I wouldn't be surprised if they did keep one of those later draft picks for a kicker. This organization drafted Zane Gonzalez in the 7th round, and then a couple years ago drafted Austin Seibert in the 5th round. So Andrew Barry has been on. He hasn't been in charge, but he's been on staffs that have picked kickers, and it's interesting because Gonzalez just never could get the yips out, and then he went on and had a pretty good year, I think, with the Cardinals, and then I think he had some problems again last year. But Seibert, that's why Parkey's here. He missed in the first game, and they moved on from him right away. I think he went to the Bengals. So yeah, I could see them doing that if there's a kicker they really feel good about. Because that is something when you have a team on the rise, you
Yeah.
don't want to be, in a close game and lose because your kicker can't make a field goal.
Yeah, because that's what I was looking at. I mean, it wasn't exactly a good special teams unit last year. And we just talked about the kicking game. So yeah, if you're trying to build a complete team, what's left is make sure you have a really good special teams as well. So we'll see how that comes into play, whether or not they have those picks remaining or not. Like you said, they could use some of those picks to trade up. Before I let you go, any other roster news? Like Njoku's contract was guaranteed. Does that mean he's definitely going to be on the team? Are they set now with those 3 tight ends?
Yeah, one of the things we talked about earlier on depth, I cannot remember. I realize this is April, but on paper, they have their starting 11 on offense returning this year. And not only the starters, the key deep
Yeah.
depth at each position. They got the backup running back in Kareem Hunt. They got the backup quarterback in Case Keenum. They got 2 backup tight ends in Harrison Bryant and David Njoku. And they have their key swing offensive lineman in Chris Hubbard, who's coming off ACL. But then Drew Forbes, who was the backup guard, returns after opting out. And so and then wide receivers already talked about it. They have 4 or 5 behind LBJ or OPJ and Beck and Landry. And so I see them, the 2 guys on offense. Njoku does have the guaranteed $6 million, and he's now coming out saying he's all in, and he realizes he probably won't be here. I doubt if he would re-sign, but if they feel they could trade him and get a starting corner or edge rusher, he's a piece I could
Yeah.
see that happening with. And also Odell Beckham, if they did great with him last year, after he tore his ACL, those are the 2 guys that they have a little surplus. I don't think necessarily they're looking to trade either, but if they could get that key edge rusher, that would be a prime where you have some assets. But other than that, I think they're returning the offense pretty much intact. And, the roster, those 5 additions to the defense, they're still trying to add Jadeveon Clowney. My people tell me they're waiting on his physical
Okay.
after a surgery. So
Okay.
who knows if he'll be here or not. But I do think Andrew Berry will be making some more moves here. But they're eons ahead of where they were last year on
But
defense.
that's definitely the one last name to keep an eye on is Clowney, Davian Clowney.
Yeah, I would think so that they did, and that's what I think. A lot of people are thinking he's waiting just to see if he gets any better offers. But what I'm hearing is it's medical. He had surgery, I think, in December, and I don't know if he's been cleared yet medically. And so, you know, that would be a stumbling block in that whole
Okay.
department. So, yeah, all things being equal, the Browns, are much better. And I think on offense, just because they're in the same offense, the same system, it's the first time Baker Mayfield is returning to the same offense in his young career. So he played so much better, down the stretch when he was comfortable. And I think that bodes well for the offense this year.
All right, Fred, before we let you go, the Orange and Brown report. Tell us a little bit about, you mentioned you got some other stories you're working on.
Yeah, just pulling up before we came on, draft preview of where the Browns are at safety now with the addition of John Johnson, but what they might be looking at in the draft, and have some of the possibilities for maybe using one of those top 100 picks on a safety for depth. And also, we have a couple other things going. We have film breakdown of some of the players that are potential draft picks, and some of the guys that the Browns might be looking to pick in the top 26.
All right. And I also want to remind everybody that by time when we talk again after the draft, I'll probably be pushing this. This is last year's review guide. So we'll be talking a lot about, and of course, I'll have responsibility on the Cleveland Browns. So I'm going to definitely pick your brain, Fred, after the draft, so we can kind of put a bow tie to the offseason, which we would think at least a couple of weeks after the draft, we'd have a pretty good idea about how the Browns roster is going to look, at least close to 95 to 98% of it.
Absolutely. You know, I think Andrew Berry has done a great job with the salary cap restrictions. They're still in great shape. They still have 13 million under the cap, and they still have are like 13th in the NFL in cap space. He's addressed the major needs. I think I still edge rusher and cornerback look for them to do something, whether it be trade, whether it be free agents still, or it could be even in the draft.
Fred, appreciate it as always. Can't wait to talk to you after the draft. It should be a lot of fun. We got a few more weeks to go, but we're going to soak it all in and enjoy the draft.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Thanks, Fred.